Okay, I've arrived at the portion of the video to where I'm going to be plum browning the barrel and the tang. I have a brand new bottle of plum brown, and the directions on the back say to heat the part up to approximately 275 degrees. So I have the tang polished, ready to go. I'm going to obviously clean it one more time before I put it in the oven. I'll set the oven for 275 degrees, and at the appropriate moment we'll pull this out and I'll saturate this with plum brown. And I'm planning right now of doing 3 coats of plum brown, both on the tang and the barrel. So here we go. Okay, before we apply any finish on the gun barrel, whether that be plum brown or any type of bluing, you want to make sure that your part is thoroughly cleaned. There seems to be some things on YouTube regarding cleaning your parts with either acetone or like a brake cleaner. Some of the questionable comments is along these lines. Acetone doesn't thoroughly clean, it leaves a little film behind, whereas the brake cleaner does not. I don't have an opinion either way, but I happened to be at the parts store the other day for other parts, and I thought, well, I'll get a can of brake clean and we'll just see. Because in the past, I've always cleaned my parts with acetone, and I've never experienced any problem myself about any film being left behind interfering with the bluing process. So I guess right now we're all going to learn whether this hinders or aids in the plum browning process. Okay, the tang is in the oven, and at that critical moment I'm going to shoot it with a heat gun to see if that part's reached 275, and when it does, I'll pull it out and I'll apply plum brown to the part. And let's all hope I don't get burnt in doing this. Okay, right now it's showing 250 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out and go ahead and saturate it with the plum brown. And I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but I actually cleaned a piece of wood so that I can set that part on a piece of wood so that I can handle it a little bit more easily. Alrighty, there's the first coat. Doesn't look half bad, but I'm going to go ahead and dry it off, buff it a little bit with steel wool, and put it back into the oven. Okay, well, now I'm to the point of full disclosure. Once I buffed it with the steel wool, I could actually see a residue left behind from using the brake cleaner. So I'm in the process of buffing off the first coat, and I'm going to clean it with acetone like I have done in the past, and I'm going to reinsert it, same temperature, 250, 275, pull it out and saturate it with plum brown, and we'll see where it how it appears at that point. Okay guys, in this process I actually went to, once again, plan 13B. I used my little heat gauge, and the part was at 300 degrees. I pulled it out and immediately applied plum brown, and there wasn't any sizzle. And that's one of the things when you do plum browning, you have to read the instructions, and it says hot enough to sizzle. They recommend 275. Now whether my oven or my temperature gauge is inaccurate, well, what I did is I pulled it out and then I used the old trusty torch, heated it up for about a minute, and then I applied the plum brown and it sizzled. So I'm going to clean this up, and from here on out do everything with the old trusty propane torch. Okay friends, I'm about ready to proceed with the second coat of the chemical browning. And make sure that you read and comprehend the directions, because if you want that deeper, more brownish looking on either the barrel or the tang or anything that you want to plum brown, it says to repeat steps 2, 3, and 4 in between coats. Well, step 2 is to go back and clean the part. Now, the reason they recommend this, and from my perspective, my opinion only, I am buffing this with steel wool. Sometimes steel wool, especially 4/0, may have some residual oils in it. So before I apply the next coat and or heat, I've gone back and I've thoroughly cleaned the part once again with acetone. So make sure you follow the directions and not skip over re-cleaning the part before the next coat. Just something that you might want to keep in mind. Okay, on my third and final coating, I'm going to go ahead and try to record all of this so you can kind of see the sizzling and how it kind of cools down as the chemical's doing its thing. And one thing that I'm electing to do, I know the directions don't say it, but in between coats I'm actually using a fresh rag to do this. Pure cotton rag and very clean. So here we go. Now I'm going to keep moving this cloth back and forth until it's cool. It's just going to help let that plum brown work in a little bit more into the metal. Even though it stopped sizzling, it's still, in my opinion, hot enough to still chemically work. Plus it also helps to wipe off some of that initial splatter that might, clump up on your part. Okay, I'm going to kind of hold it up. Hopefully you can see. That's 3 coats. I'm pleased with it. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different once I hit it with steel wool and then let it soak for at least 10 or 12 hours in some oil, because I want that oil to also set the plum brown. So I'm going to go ahead and get resituated with the camera, and then we'll work on the barrel. Okay, I'm ready to start applying heat to the barrel. Just so that you'll see how I'm doing this, at the end of the barrel where the hook is, I actually have a pair of vice grips attached right there so that I can actually rotate the barrel so that I can try to get the heat more evenly spread. I have a container, a secondary container of the plum brown that I'm going to keep a rag soaking in it so that at that critical moment the rag is ready to go. Now in my vise I have a dowel that's little less than 1/2 inch that protrudes into the barrel about halfway through, and I've wiggled it. It seems to be well supported. I guess if it breaks and falls I'll have to go back to plan 13C and start over. So let's see how this is going to work out for us. Obviously this will take a little time because there's a lot of metal to heat up. Rag's a little warm. Sorry if I'm in the way of this, guys. Turn around here and go at it from this angle. Ouch. Well, as you can see, it didn't take too long for that barrel to come up to temperature to make the plum brown sizzle. That's why I dipped my finger in the container and just checked it to make sure. I didn't have it quite hot enough in the middle, but the next go around I should be able to remedy that. It's looking a little splotchy up here, but once again, this is going to get buffed out and then cleaned and reapplied with heat, so I should be able to get some of that out. And if not, hey, it's character. You can see, that's why they call it chemical rusting. And in case anybody's wondering or thinking at this point about the underlug with the barrels from the ramrod sets, I'm going to leave that blued just simply because I'm going to leave the sights blued and I'm using it as a color contrast. Okay, friends, I've elected to put 4 coats instead of 3 just simply because I don't have anything else that I plan on plum browning anytime soon, so I'm going to use up most of what I have. So I've already gone ahead and put the 4th coat on the tang, so I'm going to go ahead and record this. This time, hopefully, I'll stay out of view of the camera. Okay, I'm going to let that set for a few minutes. Take it over to the faucet, wash it off, and start buffing it up. And then I'm going to hand rub some vegetable oil in it and then let it set until tomorrow. So for you, it'll be just a flash in a moment. For me, it'll be a day. Well, all in all, it didn't turn out half bad. Remembering what the barrel looked like originally, I'm pretty pleased with it. So let me kind of scan back and forth a little bit. I know there's a lot of light reflecting off of this right now. And as I mentioned, and if I have not mentioned it, I'm going to mention it again. I elected to go ahead and super glue the rear sight and also the front sight. And the reason why I did that, because the rib that the barrels are setting on, that the ramrod would go through, is already blued. Now, whether anybody is aware of this or not, on this particular rifle, this lug right here is actually aluminum. And yes, I did. I put a magnet to it, and a magnet will not stick. So that's one of the reasons why I went ahead and did the front sight, or I should say the rear sight, and the front sight. I actually blued those so that I could have a color contrast when you look at the barrel. So all in all, it didn't turn out half bad. And as I stated, remembering what it looked like originally, I'm pretty well pleased with it. The only thing that I'm kind of wishing at this point is that it was a left-handed rifle. But it's not. So anyhow, I'm going to continue on with the rest of the video, because the next portion will be the toe plate and what was decided to do with it. So carrying on, after having put up that video questioning whether you friends think I should put a toe plate on this or not, obviously decided to do it. And 3 days after having put up that video, there was only 2 comments regarding the toe plate in itself. One viewer said yes, do it, and the other one said no, so the yeses or the yays have it. So I'm to the point now where I am fitting the toe plate to the edge right in through here. And I do have some other screws. I actually purchased a package of screws from Dixie Gun Works along with a few other things. But I will note, you know, I'm not the best at this, and since I only had to do this with small chisels and sandpaper and things like that, I got a little wide right here. Not really that big of a deal, because this is gonna I'm gonna just explain how I intend in resolving that. Okay, what I have here is the wood filler. It's like a Bondo. It works just like a Bondo, but you have to work with it pretty quick. And as I mentioned in a previous video, at least I think I did, your stain may or may not react the same way as it does with the wood. Now, what I plan on doing is, once I get this stock complete to the point that I want it, I'm going to be using the Hawken Danish oil with the light walnut stain. Now, I mentioned before that when I was in the cabinet business, I learned how to match stains very, very good. The biggest thing is when you're trying to match a stain, especially when you're using putty, you have to do it outside in the brightest of sunlight. And that's why in the cabinet business, I was generally the guy that used to go back and do all the putty work, because I could match the putty to the stain that was on the cabinets. But what I'm going to do here, it's just a little bit of a different technique, although the application is still the same. So what I did is, when I'm sanding down the stock, I went through and I saved a whole bunch of the sawdust. Let me get around and do a little close-up on this. So you friends can see that there's actually quite a bit of sawdust in this container. How I'm going to do this is, I'm going to mix the putty, and then I'm going to mix some of the sawdust in the putty. And then obviously, or I should say the wood filler, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill this in just a little bit. And because I have the sawdust from the wood that's on this particular stock, the Hawken Danish oil should be able to help blend it in very, very well. I've done this before with other things, this same technique, so I already kind of have an idea where this is going to go and how it's going to turn out. But obviously, we're not going to be able to see it until I get it completed. And I'm getting to that point. I think the final thing I have to do right now is just fit the toe plate to the butt. And yes, I'm acknowledging now, in the previous video, I kept calling the butt plate the toe plate. Yes, I do recognize that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. It's pretty cold here in New Mexico the next couple of days. Tomorrow being Friday, I don't know when this will all get up, but I'm just speaking in the present. Tomorrow is Friday, and our high here where I live is only supposed to be 32 degrees. I'm definitely not going to be staining this tomorrow with those kind of temperatures. And with that being all stated and rambled up about, somebody had made a comment about heating up the butt plate and forming it that way. And I would agree with that, with the exception that when it comes to brass, you better darn well know what you're dealing with, because brass reacts to heat different than, say, a mild steel or a high carbon steel. And you really have to know what type of brass you're dealing with, because there's white brass, there's yellow brass, there's manganese. And if you just do a real quick search on YouTube, you will see that there are different heat ranges that need to be applied to those different types of brasses. So that's why when I get everything done, I've got everything fit really good, I'm going to remove the butt plate. At the same time I go and fill this in, and I'm going to clean off all of the other putty. I've used this putty once already here just to fit, with the mindset that I'm going to be removing it and filling it in so that when I put the stain on, or at least the Watco penetrating oil, some of that oil will penetrate into the sawdust and it should be almost invisible. But until I get to that point and actually do it, we'll just have to wait and see. So anyhow, I'm going to get back to work on this, get that toe plate fit, and just to give everybody a little, not so much a heads up, but I haven't been able to work on this because of the weather. So what have I been doing? Well, I've been making holsters. This is the 51 Navy, and this is the holster that I made for it. It's not a Slim Jim, obviously, and from my perspective, I really don't care about being period correct, because once again, these are just tools. When I carry this in the field, I don't need to be period correct with a Slim Jim. And that's the 51 Navy. And then yesterday I finished the holster for the 62 pocket pistol. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of context here, this holster, I use the same pattern that I have for this holster. I just downsized it to fit the 62 pocket Navy. Little lanyard, there we go, to put over the hammer, and then if I need to, I put a little piece of horn right here and just pull it tight so it stays in the holster. Now, I've actually put the belt strap back here, and as you can see, it's at an angle. That's because I plan on carrying this on my left side at an angle about, there we go, about like this. So, there's the holster. I've stained the holsters myself, and just in case somebody might ask, might be curious, I do have all the leather stamping to make a really fancy holster, but on these two, I just elected not to do it. Okay, so I'm going to get to work, and when I get to that other point in the video that I need to turn the camera on, I'll do it, because I'm going to try to make this one long video and finishing up at least the Cabela's Hawken. There's the south end of the mountain, and as I pan towards the north, it's going to get nasty here for the next couple of days, besides being cold. So before I sign off, I want to thank everybody for joining in on this adventure. I certainly enjoyed sharing this build with you all, or this restoration with all of the guns. And there's a look at the other side. All in all, I've been very pleased with the restoration of this particular rifle, and I'm anxious for a couple of good days when I can get out and see how she shoots. I hope that you friends will continue to like and remain subscribed and share these with your bestest of buddies. You friends have a wonderful week. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. Stay warm, stay healthy, and for heaven's sakes, keep your powder dry, and may your aim be true. So long for now.